Sir Martin Sorrell es una de las figuras más importantes de la publicidad y las relaciones públicas a nivel mundial. Tiene una historia que vale la pena conocer y vamos a hablar con él, que está de visita aquí en Buenos Aires. Welcome, Sir Martin Sorrell.
Good to be here.
Okay, what's the future of publicity? What's the future?
I wish I knew is the answer.
I think you knew it.
Well, if I look at it from the point of view of S4 Capital, which is our new entry into the market. I mean, I've done three things in my career in advertising and marketing. The first was the Saatchi brothers and the growth of Saatchi, which was really about globalization. Warren Buffett said that he bought into IPG and Ogilvy in the 1980s because it was a royalty on the growth of US multinationals outside the US. So that was one thing. Then I guess with WPP, which we started in 1985 and I ran for over 30 years, what we really were about was the continuation of globalization, particularly into parts of the world like Asia, Latin America, Africa, Middle East and Central Eastern Europe, and also about adjusting to the growth of digital. I mean, if I went back 20 years to the year 2000, Asia Pacific, the BRICS and Next 11 were about 10% of our business. And at what WPP, they're now a third, and digital was non-existent, it's now 40%. So those were the big changes. And as I look at S4 Capital and what you're asking about the future of the company, I think the future will be totally around digital. So we're building a purely digital business focused on three areas with a strategic area in addition. The first being content, digital content. The second being first-party data, which is the data that clients have about their customers. And then thirdly, media, digital media planning and buying. So those three areas are the critical areas. And overlaying on top of that, strategic execution in terms of digital transformation at the C level, at the chief executive, CMO, CFO, CIO, chief information officer, chief technology officer. So there are three critical areas in digital, which currently is about 40% of worldwide advertising and is projected within a few years to be at least 55% and probably will permeate everything. So being digital first is a critical area. So the three areas of content, of data, and last but not least, digital media planning and buying, and then providing access to the C-suite for digital transformation.
How difficult it is for traditional companies to transform into digital?
Well, it's very difficult for. I mean, I can't think of an industry, you know, in your own industry, in communications, but whether you're in manufacturing and you have to deal with robotics, or AI, or artificial intelligence, whether you're in distribution and retailing, you have to deal with Amazon and Alibaba and Tencent and Mercado Libre and others. Whatever industry you're in, if you're running a legacy business, a traditional business, trying to change is fraught with difficulty because you have vested interests. And by the way, those are interests that are producing the cash flow and the profitability. I mean, it's a bit like you try and think of an analogy, trying to fly an aeroplane and change the engines whilst you're flying. It's a very, very difficult thing to do. And I can't think of an industry, a category, or indeed a company that isn't subject to that transformational change.
What was your legacy in WPP?
Well, that's not for me to say. That's for you and others.
I think you know the legacy.
No.
Yeah.
Listen. What we did at WPP was to build a company from zero. It was a wire basket manufacturer called Wire and Plastic Products in 1985 into the world's leading company, probably around the turn of the millennium, about 2000, and continued that position at 2014. I mean, what we did was really build the company globally, as I said, and then added the technological dimension. I mean, basically, if you think about strategic opportunities or challenges, there are two sorts. They're geographical. There's a geographical bucket, and then there's a technological bucket. And what we did at WPP was to build the company geographically, so that would be one area, and build its digital capability. And then the other things we did actually was to focus on clients on a worldwide basis, and then to shift the model to a country management model as well. Because ultimately, WPP has to become one firm. It has to be a McKinsey or it has to be a Goldman Sachs, and it has to build an integrated approach at the client level and at the country level. And then probably, given the importance of digital technology, in terms of digital too. So simplifying the verticals, getting rid of the silos, introducing a country management and client management, and then making sure that digital permeates everything you do.
You are one of the most important players, and you built the most important player in PR and advertisement.
My mother thought I was the most important.
No, but not you?
No, well,
okay, but
that was mothers, you know, Jewish mothers.
Yeah, okay, we love it. We love them. We love them. But tell us about the lots of mergers and acquisitions you did. I mean, how was that experience and how exciting it was?
Well, when you start with nothing, and your objective is to be a major multinational marketing services company, and we started, you know, Saatchi's was different because I came in at a certain stage of development. With WPP, we started from nothing, from the beginning, from zero, and with S4 Capital, we're starting from the beginning as well. So if you don't have, you can build it organically, but it takes an awful long time. You'd be dead before you got anywhere. So you have to use acquisitions in a sort of aggressive way, and we did that both at Saatchi's and at WPP, and we're doing it now at S4 Capital. We've made our first merger with Media Monks, which has an operation here in Buenos Aires, a very successful one, has operations in Latin America, in Sao Paulo, and in Mexico City, and we continue to build that. But we'll build through acquisition as well as organically. But the big opportunity is to be faster, better, and more efficient with clients, because given that digital transformation I talked about and that you laid great emphasis on and the difficulty of it, you have to learn to operate in an environment which is much more agile, demands much more agility, much more responsiveness, less bureaucracy, that produces better work, better and cheaper, and more efficiently. So there's a critical difference in an increasingly competitive environment. And the analogy actually to political campaigns, I think, is a very pertinent one. I mean, in a political campaign, you have a concentrated campaign in a short period of time, but it's 24/7, it's always on. And that is very much the picture commercially now. Given the rise of search and social and e-commerce, as we're sitting here, I'm sure a change is taking place in a category or in an industry or in a competitive situation which demands an immediate response from you to your competitors. And so you're almost running a political campaign, not for a finite period, but in perpetuity, in order to respond. So you have to be faster, you have to be better, and you have to be more efficient.
And what do you think about frenemies like Google?
Well, I think they're less of an enemy than they were. I mean, for positive reasons, because you know, a lot of people say that they are competitive with the agencies. I don't think they are. They are partners to the agency. But they have their own issues. I mean, if you, Google and Facebook are dominant in the digital marketplace is probably all up about 200 billion. The advertising marketing services market is about $1 trillion, 500 billion in old stuff and 500 billion in new stuff. And about 200 billion of it is in pure digital. And Google and Facebook, between them last year, about 140 billion, and they have about 75% of the market. The third force is Amazon, and that is putting pressure on Google and Facebook, both in terms of search, because 55% of product search in the United States is done on Amazon already, and Amazon is developing its own digital advertising platform. It's only at about $8 billion a year, as opposed to Google at 100 billion and Facebook at 40 billion last year, and Google will be about 125 billion and Facebook probably about 50 billion this year. But Amazon is coming quickly. I mean, not so much with the big advertisers, but with the small and medium-sized enterprises. So that will be a threat. And of course, Amazon is not the only challenge. It's Alibaba and Tencent, particularly in the Chinese market, are really strong competitors that are expanding globally as well. So it's become a very competitive marketplace. And I think you'd have to say that Google and Facebook are modifying their approach. Part of it may be for the reasons that you're sort of hinting at, that the duopoly that many people says exists, or the triopoly with Amazon, or the five with Tencent and Alibaba, that concentration means the only thing that can stop them is regulation. And therefore they're increasingly conscious of that fact. I mean, we have 2 decisions by the Director General in the EU, Vestager, and there's another decision to come. So that's putting pressure on them, apart from issues like privacy, fake news, Cambridge Analytica, all of them putting pressure on the existing models to be more responsible in these sort of areas. So that is driving us to work much more closely with Google and Facebook, and I think working to their benefit and our benefit as well.
This is your visit number 15 to Argentina.
Something like that, yes. Over the 40 years I've been coming to Argentina. Yeah.
And what's your opinion about this country and Buenos Aires in particular?
Well, at one level, we were talking at lunch today, you know, Argentina has not changed much. And I remember
that's our tragedy, you know?
Well, it is in a way, yeah. I mean, it is still very cyclical.
Yes.
I mean, when I first came to South America, which was in about 1969, to Carnival in Rio, I remember reading John Gunter's book, Inside South America and Latin America, and he went back in history to all the travelers and economists who talked about takeoff. You know, Walt Rostow was a famous economist.
Yes.
And he had the stages of economic growth, and one of the first stages was liftoff, takeoff. And people have been saying that South America was going to take off for many years, and they've said the same thing about Argentina. And to some extent, although Argentina has changed physically, I mean, here we are in this particular building and in this particular part of Buenos Aires, and it clearly has changed very significantly from the end of the 60s and into the 70s. But the boom and bust, the cyclicality is still there, and I think that's the thing that has to be dealt with. I mean, I'm part of I guess the foreign observers that found Macri and the changes that Macri promised and is trying to deliver to make Argentina even more attractive. You went back in history, Argentina was a much more dominant economy on a world stage because of its natural resources and human resources. So, you know, it is a little bit of a puzzle and to some extent a tragedy that a country that is so rich in terms of human resources as well as natural resources can't regain the power it used to have and can't develop further. Now, I think it's possible to break out of it, but it cannot be done without some sacrifices, particularly in the short term. You know, short-term pain for long-term gain, and I think that's where the political difficulty lies. But I, for one, hope that Macri will succeed. I hope he runs again next year, and I hope he's successful in the elections, because I think philosophically he's doing the right thing. And that applies not just to Argentina, but the whole of Latin America, the whole of South America. I mean, it is very important, looking to the future of our industry, that happens. Having said that, 2 things to say. One is that the quality of creative resources here in Argentina is very strong. I mean, in terms of the advertising industry and the digital advertising industry, you look at companies like Globant, Mercado Libre. These are companies that are not just strong on an Argentinian stage or a regional stage, but a worldwide stage. They're really good companies. And there is no reason why Argentine creativity in the traditional sense in our industry and in the new sense can't be successful. And the silver lining of volatility in the currency and of devaluation is it makes the product cheaper. So it makes it, you know, get more traction on a worldwide basis. So one of the things I've noticed is that there are very big opportunities for Argentine agencies or agencies based in Argentina to develop their servicing and their capabilities on a worldwide basis.
And how was your experience as stakeholder from Globant, for example?
Well, I think WPP made a terrible error. I would say, I'm in danger of saying this, but negligence, actually, to sell their 20%. It makes no sense whatsoever. I mean, WPP needs more of the type of resources that Globant can provide. You know, Globant, Martin Migoya and his colleagues have built a company with, what, $500 million or so revenue, a market cap of over $2 billion, from a base here in Buenos Aires, through South America, into North America, into Europe and India and beyond. So they've done very well. it wasn't an easy process to acquire 20% of Globant, and to throw it away like that makes no sense to me whatsoever. I mean, the argument that you had to sell it to raise cash, there were plenty of other assets you could sell in WPP. So if I had been running WPP, there was no way that we would have sold the Globant stake. And I think it's a fundamental error, actually. I think a major strategic blunder by the company.
And do you miss that part of your life? I mean, being at...
well, you know, at one level, yes. I mean, I miss the scale. At the other level, I have a clean sheet of paper, so I can do, you know, I'm not limited. Yes. I'm not limited. I mean, the three areas that we pegged out, I mean, basically, I looked at what WPP did, looked at its 20 billion of revenues and said, obviously, media continues to be a growth area, particularly digital. Data, not all parts of data, not the custom data business, but the syndicated data business, the first-party data business, and then content, digital content is exploding, literally. I mean, it's really growing very rapidly. So what we've done is try and pick out the growth areas without any of the baggage of the legacy areas that, coming back to your question about digital transformation, make it so difficult for a legacy business to grow.
And what do you think about the local talent? For example, Martin Mercado or other...
I think they're first class. I mean, I think, and I'm not just saying it because I happen to be talking to you sitting here in Buenos Aires in Argentina. I'm not being polite, but if you look at the quality of creative resources, and I'm using the word creative in the very broadest sense. I'm not saying, you know, traditional Don Draper creativity, but that and creativity.
Not man.
No, I'm talking about it in a broader sense and in a more contemporary and more modern sense. Argentine capability ranks with anywhere else in the world. And I would include the United States, and I would include the UK and other markets too. I mean, it's very strong indeed. And so nobody in Buenos Aires or Argentina should be embarrassed about the quality of the advertising or digital talent, because it is first class.
And which is the worst part of Argentinian people?
Of Argentinian?
Talent.
Well, the Argentinians have got quite strong personalities. Good people are difficult to manage. Average people are easy to manage. So I think probably the most difficult part is that because they're good, they're difficult. And therefore, you know, it can, you know, the big issue for companies is how do you harness all the talent that you have inside a company, and it doesn't matter whether it's small or medium and large, and you angle it or you aim it at the common purpose. The days in our industry, in my view, have gone whereby people operated on their own or operated as a cell. With the growth of technology and with this ability that we now have through technology, which will become even more important over time, the ability to exchange information, experience, knowledge is so great that getting people to work together to a common purpose is critically important. And I think that is the one thing that you have to do. So it's not, you know, if you're part of a multinational company, it's not how Buenos Aires works or doesn't work. It's not how Argentina works or doesn't work. It's not even how South America works or doesn't work. It's how the whole thing works together if it's a global enterprise towards a common purpose. So creating one firm without the silos, without the internal competition, again, to a common purpose is critically important. I mean, it's the same for a country. How can you galvanize, you know, you think about the world leaders, you know, those whose names begin with M often do well. Modi, Merkel, Macri, hopefully, are all examples of people who are trying to move countries in a much more unified way. And that's, you know, the same thing for companies. It's very difficult to do that because trying to harness the abilities of people in multiple centers to a common purpose is the critically important thing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.